Chapter 28. Even if I hadn't been consumed by my own thoughts, I wouldn't have been able to focus on the sounds from the wedding outside anyway. The buzzing from the audience grew to such a pitch that it felt like wasps had created a nest inside my brain. Whether it was because I wasn't paying attention or because weddings go quickly once all the guests are seated, the ceremony seemed to flash by. Granted, I intentionally blocked out all the noise I could, because I couldn't bear the thought of hearing Korth exchange vows with someone as despicable as Odette. He would promise to be faithful to whomever he married, and I knew he would be, even if Odette wouldn't return his love or his loyalty. I ignored all of Peter Pan's attempts to engage me in conversation, curling up into a ball instead and wishing fervently that they had sent any other girl from the rebellion. The pain of loving, then losing Korth was more than I could bear. What I wouldn't trade to revert back to my state of ignorant bliss when I assumed that all royalty were corrupt and evil. The world was so much simpler back then. Now I would always be burdened with the knowledge that I had doomed a good man to a lifetime of heartache and misery. At least for the rest of my shortened life. The most hidden parts of my heart wished that Korth would come rushing back and say that he had seen the light and was willing to forgive me of my treasonous acts, and that what we had was irreplaceable. Such dreams were as real as my innocence. A prince would never be permitted to wed a convicted criminal, no matter how much we loved each other. Besides, he was married to Odette now. He would have placed a ring on another woman's finger and sworn to love her. Not me. The thought caused me more anguish than any pain that could ever be dealt to my physical body. Too heartbroken to eat the sorry meals that the guards shoved through the bars, I lay unmoving on my bunk, ignoring how Peter Pan managed to construct some type of hook out of the debris in his cell and drag my meal trays over to himself. I didn't think I'd ever be hungry again. What was there to do other than eat and sleep? I had always known I would hang for my crimes, and the eternal nothingness that was my future hovered over me like a giant axe, waiting for my sentence before it fell to snuff out my life. For 2 days, I barely moved. I slept as much as possible, desperate for any relief from the gnawing heartache that threatened to cleave me in two. But instead of respite, my dreams were filled of scenes from my time with Korth, mocking the temporary happiness I'd been allowed before it was so cruelly snatched away. The pitiful meals were hardly tempting, and I ignored them more often than not. After the first day, Peter Pan must have grown bored with his game of trying to scoot my bowl of stew into his own cell, or else took pity on me and hoped I would eat more if he left it. Twice, he tried to poke me with his makeshift hook that looked like spoons from our meals lashed together with bits of fabric ripped from his shirt sleeves. I irritably swatted it away each time. What, did he expect that I would want to chat about the weather? How was I supposed to find a way to help the rebellion when I was trapped in a cell? The only way I could have communicated with Garrick, whose cell was around the corner from mine, would be to shout, and doing so would reveal any plan we concocted to all the guards. Everything around me looked to be floating in a haze, slowly shifting in and out of focus. My parents would hear of my failure and subsequent imprisonment. They would carry on their life's mission without me, and I would sit in this cell until I died. I had no visitors, but Peter Pan did. Tess came to talk to him on the second day after Korth's wedding. Seeing her only reminded me that she would never be my sister. She would have comforted Korth and listened to Odette tell her all of my sins. The sound of their conversation drifted over to me, but I did my best to tune them out. I didn't have the mental acuity to debate Peter's twisted morals. A humorless snort flared my nostrils. Who was I to lecture anyone about twisted morals? I had committed a dozen crimes, all in the name of subjective justice. Dahlia? Dahlia! Tess's insistent voice finally punctuated my stupor, and I turned to stare at her shadowy silhouette in the ghostly flickering dungeon light. Peter said you aren't eating very much. I couldn't even work up the energy to shrug. What's the point? I don't need a lot of energy to sleep, and I'm going to die here anyway.
Korth doesn't want you to die.
This time, a real laugh, albeit a choked and hoarse one, escaped from my dry throat. He was the one who threw me in here.
But he doesn't want you to die.
And you didn't want Peter to die either. So now he and I get to live out the rest of our miserable lives here. Korth would never forgive me, and I couldn't blame him. My attempt at making a difference in the world had failed, and now I had nothing else to do but wait for the end, no matter how desperately I wanted to escape. I wasn't willing to corrupt Tess by trying to convince her to release me. I don't know if she actually heard anything you said while she was over there feeling sorry for herself. Peter's sly voice contributed. I'd never been so thankful I didn't have a younger brother until that moment. Teenage boys were the worst.
I was just telling Peter that Korth and Odette didn't get married after all.
That got my attention. With a sudden surge of energy, I slid my legs off my wooden bunk and sat up. The world spun, but I narrowed my eyes and dug my nails into the heels of my hands, forcing myself to focus. What?
He called off the wedding. I thought you'd want to know.
My jaw hung slack. The tiniest flicker of hope flared in my chest. Had I somehow gotten through to him? Was it that he still loved me, somewhere in the deepest recesses of his heart? When?
Right before they were supposed to get married. Everyone was already sitting down and everything. Odette was really mad.
I bet she was. What did Korth say about it?
He said that there are too many things he isn't sure of, but he won't talk about you with anyone. Not even me.
What are they going to do now?
Korth's taking Odette back to Ibora tomorrow. He said it was the least he could do, but I think he wants to see for himself what it's like. That was one of the reasons he called off the wedding.
If I'd had any more energy, I would have laughed out loud. Raquel knew how to put on a front. Anytime a visiting dignitary came to call, he would send soldiers to clear the streets of the beggars. To anyone from the outside looking in, Ibora would appear to be the model of an industrious, prosperous kingdom, with a thriving economy and content citizens, even though nothing could be farther from the truth. My visions spun faster. Odette was returning home, where my parents were, and Curdy knew all the identities of the others in the rebellion. He had likely already revealed all our names to Odette. Once she got back, she would... I nearly blacked out. My parents and everyone in the rebellion would be in grave danger when they realized our coup had failed. Odette would report everyone and have them brutally executed. I refused to believe that Korth, righteous, upstanding Korth, would stand idly by and watch such treatment. But even if he wanted to intervene, what could he do in a kingdom that wasn't his own? He didn't tell me, I whispered. I didn't know they didn't get married.
He was told he's not allowed to see you anymore. His advisor said you would just lie to him again. Well, they said some other stuff too, but I don't want to repeat it.
She tapped her foot nervously against the floor.
I don't believe what they said.
Peter spoke up and drew Tess's attention back to himself. Just like you didn't listen when they told you to have me executed. And now we're friends. I'm glad you think for yourself. What books did you bring today? I slumped back, more defeated than I'd ever felt in my life. What purpose did I have now? The entire world turned hazy and blurred as I again zoned out of everything going on around me. I couldn't even muster the energy to try to deter Tess from teaching Peter to read. From the quick snatches of conversation that occasionally permeated my stupor, I could tell he had a quick mind. Was that the only thing in my future? Reading while I waited to hear my family's fate, knowing I was unable to warn them? I didn't even have the luxury of visitors like Peter did. He punctuated their reading lesson by making anything that Tess handed him through the bars, bookmarks, a spoon from his last meal, and a silver coin, disappear with clever sleight of hand. Tess's mouth hung open in amazement each time, earning her a few smiles that almost looked genuine from him. If I hadn't known he was a hardened criminal with a knack for manipulating people, I could have pictured him as a doting older brother.
Well done, Peter!
Tess chirped after a lengthy lesson during which they read pages back and forth to each other.
I think you're ready to move up to a little more difficult of reading material. What do you want me to bring tomorrow?
What other books do you have? He asked, sounding far too comfortable talking to Tess for my liking. No prisoner would ever have any positive feelings toward his captor, or else I would have ventured to say that they sounded like friends. I could only imagine what horrors would await my family and friends back in Ibora. Myself, too, if I was ever shipped back on a criminal transport boat.
All sorts,
she answered eagerly.
History, adventures, romances, myths and legends, even cookbooks.
Any battle strategy ones?
Lots of those. Korth sometimes studies them, but he reads the ones on policy and laws more often. Or bridges.
I'd be interested to read some battle strategy ones. Or some adventure stories. Just nothing with pirates. I'm somewhat averse to those.
Deal! I'll bring them tomorrow after my harp lesson.
And I will wait for you right here until then. I promise. Tess laughed.
Good night, Peter. I'll see you tomorrow.
She stopped outside my cell.
Good night, Dahlia. I'll see you tomorrow, too. Do you want me to bring you a book as well?
I shook my head, mind still full of the fact that Korth and Odette hadn't gotten married. I didn't want to read. I had spent so long plotting and scheming every waking minute that I didn't know what else to do with myself. How was I supposed to scheme my way out of a locked iron cell, sneak out of town, and traverse an ocean without a ship and without being detected? It was just as easy as instigating a civil war now that my enemies knew my plans. Tess bobbed on the balls of her feet outside my cell door.
Is there anything else I can do for you? Do you need another pillow?
I shook my head. Just tell Korth to be safe. I really don't want him to get hurt. Hey. Peter Pan's voice, devoid of its usual mischievous tone, pierced through my stupor after Tess left. Don't give up. Slowly, I rolled my head around to gaze at him. He was leaned up against the bars separating our cells, staring at me with the ghost of a smile on his face. How do you suggest I do that? Think happy thoughts? I don't have any. Everyone does if they think hard enough. I don't want to. Peter Pan stared hard at me for a long minute. Many things can be taken from you when you're in prison, but no one can take your thoughts. It's only when you let someone else have control over those that you finally lose. Anger flared red hot. Did this stupid little boy think it was just that simple? That I could choose to be happy? He had no idea. Thoughts won't get me out of this cell. Thoughts won't free the people who are enslaved in Ibora. Thoughts won't make Korth... I broke off, unwilling to discuss my feelings for Korth with anyone. If only those could be buried so deep that they would never resurface again. No, but if you wallow in misery, you'll never be of use to anyone, including yourself. So you had some bad things happen to you. Everyone does. You can either have a bad life because of it, or a good life in spite of it. But it's your life. Live it however you want. I can't live it however I want. I'm stuck here and always will be. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. Do you want to escape? I lifted my head and shot him a withering stare. No, I drawled. Being locked in a prison cell is my life's ambition. Not all of us can just think happy thoughts and have it magically make things better. Peter smirked and reached down to pull 2 small items from beneath his bunk. They looked like the soup spoons we were sometimes given, but he had shaved both the metal handles into tiny, thin rods. One had a sharp point, while the other looked like a tiny hook. But thinking happy thoughts gives your mind the freedom to plan the future, rather than wallowing in self-pity. Without hope, despair and learned helplessness traps people better than chains ever could. With a surreptitious glance up and down the corridor, he reached his arms through the iron bars to the lock that faced the opposite wall. Peter closed his eyes in concentration, inserted the picks into the lock, and began fiddling with it. After several tense minutes, there was a very satisfying click, and his door swung open. My mouth hung agape as I stared at him, lost for words. Instead of running off down the hall and disappearing from view, Peter held a finger to his lips, crouched beside my cell door, and picked my lock, too. A minute later, another loud click sounded, and my heart leapt into my throat, wondering if the guards would appear. With a great deal of dramatic flourishing of his hands, Peter bowed and gestured for me to step out of my iron cell. "Your freedom." I could hardly breathe. This was too good to be true. What was he playing at? "What?" "Right. You came in with another friend. Come on." Peter also released Garrick from his cell, then handed him the lock-picking tools. "I suggest you practice," he said. Then, without another word, Peter turned and re-entered his cell, shutting the door behind him with a metallic grinding sound. "But don't you want to escape too?" I asked in bewilderment. The red-headed young man quirked an eyebrow. "Didn't you tell Tess to leave me here to rot? Besides, if I wanted to escape, I'd have done so long before now. I wouldn't wait around, boo-hooing to be saved." "You want to stay in prison? Why?" A wicked smile flashed across Peter's face. "I have my reasons, but am not at all compelled to share them with you. And you better hurry before they find you. Don't you have a princess to kill or more treason to commit or something?" He flashed a wink. "Enjoy the chaotic life of a hardened criminal. It has its advantages." Garrick and I wasted no time sneaking out of the prison, ducking out of sight, and dodging into the shadows any time there was so much as the thought of the jingle of keys. It seemed that I didn't draw a single breath as we crept out of the prison and into the dark gardens. I'd expected to feel weak after days of barely eating, but my freedom acted as a stimulant just as effective as my early hatred of Odette, and I managed to trail after Garrick with no difficulty.
"I say we get down to the docks and find a ship to stow away on,"
Garrick breathed into my ear, nodding toward the port. Before I could agree, a familiar profile, silhouetted against the moon, came into view and sat on a stone bench facing the footbridge. Korth. I froze, praying that he hadn't heard us. Garrick dropped down to his belly, silently slithering along in the grass like a snake, using the hedge as a shield until he reached the far side of the courtyard. He looked back, waving me on, but I couldn't move. Korth had reached into his jacket and withdrawn the portrait of us at the masquerade. He ran his thumb over it and let out a quiet sob. My face screwed up as I averted my eyes and followed Garrick. It was better this way. Chapter 29. A merchant ship flying Ibora's colors was anchored in the harbor, the emerald flag fluttering in the early morning breeze. A mountain of crates and barrels were piled on the boardwalk beside the ship. Were they loading or unloading? No honorable merchant would ever knowingly grant an escaped convict safe passage.
"Do you see it?"
Garrick's growl of a voice came from next to me. "Kind of hard to miss a giant ship," I hissed back.
"The tattoo, genius."
I squinted at the few sailors climbing the rigging. There. As one of the men stretched out his hand to unfurl a sail, his exposed forearm flashed the tattoo, a compass with a dagger stabbed into the center. This was no merchant ship. This was a pirate vessel disguised as one. Our underground rebellion had worked with them often enough in the past, but I'd never communicated directly with them. They were often the ones who smuggled in weapons and stolen goods to sell on the black market. I eyed the stabbed compass tattoo, well aware that my own moral compass had been skewed plenty of times before. Did we have enough time to stow away before the guards found us? I wondered how long it would be before the soldiers would sweep out, looking for us. One of the sailors aboard the disguised pirate vessel had spotted us looking.
"What do you want?"
he barked.
"I wish to speak with the captain of this vessel. We'd like to barter passage,"
Garrick answered. The sailor slowly looked me up and down in a way that left me feeling vulnerable and exposed.
"I'll get him. I think he'd like to hear your proposal."
Pirates. My skin crawled as he walked away, and I crossed my arms across my chest. If our hunch was wrong and this crew wasn't a part of the rebellion, I had only ever been familiar with rebels in the palace, but knew that other meetings were held in secret across the country, all waiting for word that the time for the Civil War had begun. The precariousness of our situation was teetering dangerously close to complete failure. Korth, Odette, and Curdy would be setting sail back to Ibora any time today. How many of my fellow rebels would be captured and questioned, possibly even tortured until they gave up information? Only a few minutes passed, but it felt like a lifetime as my nerves jangled, and I fought the urge to run and hide. Each distant voice reminded me that the guards had likely already discovered my empty cell and would be on the hunt. If this didn't work, I didn't know what else I would do. The captain turned out to be a lean, middle-aged man with greasy hair tied back in a low ponytail and a golden hoop dangling from his ear. Everything about him made me want to hurl, from the slithering way he moved to the lifeless, beady black eyes that glowed with lust.
"How may I assist the loveliest of ladies?"
He reached out his hand for mine, but Garrick stepped forward. Never once breaking eye contact, Garrick lifted his fingers to touch his earlobe, lips, then forehead. I mimicked him, waiting. "Please, please, please," I prayed. The captain's eyes widened slightly, and he stiffened, dropping his oily manner and adopting a crisper, more businesslike tone.
"Allow me to introduce myself. Captain Tyrone Renshaw, at your service."
He copied the rebellion's secret signal.
"In shadows we thrive. In unity we rise."
Relief washed over me as I heard his name. While I would be a fool to feel safe around any slimy pirate such as this, at least I knew his loyalties lay with the rebellion. "Captain Renshaw, I believe it was you who picked up the soldiers from Marooner's Island we left for you?" His upper lip curled into an untrustworthy leer.
"Ah, yes. If you wish to have your men back, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I sold them all to my brother some weeks ago."
"We require immediate passage to Ibora. Immediate safe passage," I amended, with the slightest look at his crewmen who prowled in the shadows. "It's of the utmost importance to our success."
"Crowley,"
Captain Renshaw barked.
"wake the crew and cast off immediately. Inform them that we will have 2 guests."
Crowley chuckled in a guttural way that made my hair stand on end. The captain's hand shot out and gripped his comrade in a vice-like grip.
"No one touches her. She is under my protection. Understood?"
After a disappointed mutter, the man slunk off to do as commanded.
"I look forward to our voyage together, Miss
Dahlia, and this is Garrick." His crocodile-like smile boasted several golden teeth that matched his earring.
"Pleased to have you aboard."
The journey was terrible. Nothing like the quaint voyage to Haven Harbor when there had been nothing but clear skies and calm seas. The foul weather began less than an hour after we left port and continued for what felt like forever. Waves beat mercilessly against the ship's hull, sending the vessel rolling from side to side at ever more frightening angles. Each rocking motion sent me staggering into whatever furniture or railing was closest, barrels toppling and rolling around the deck with such force that my legs were bruised black and blue. With each violent, stomach-lurching roll, I feared that the ship would spin out of control or capsize. Captain Renshaw shouted at his men, who scrambled about the deck, securing crates and barrels and tying down sails while the captain held tight to the helm. I had no idea how he knew where he was going with rain pelting his eyes and swollen gray clouds obscuring the sky, but the bow sliced through the water like a giant knife, sending spray high into the air on both sides of the ship as it plowed on. Lightning flashed behind a low cloud, searing its outlines into my vision even after my eyes closed. I clawed my way upright between the shields and weapons that spanned the ship's bulwarks, and doing my best to time my retching with the moments when my side of the ship was already tilted toward the sea. I never wanted to embark on another sea voyage again. Strands of hair plastered against my face and neck, and nausea rolled my stomach in waves just as violent as those crashing against the ship. At least I don't have to worry about unwanted advances from any of the men, I thought sardonically as I watched them scramble up the rigging, tugging on the lines and whipping knots around the mast to secure any loose ropes, all too preoccupied with staying alive to pay me the slightest mind. I wasn't sure it was worth the trade with the horrific seasickness I was experiencing. I'd dealt with Curdy's flirting long enough to know how to dissuade it. Although, I reminded myself, his jealousy and unrequited feelings were what had landed me in this situation. Ugh, why did love have to be so messy? Regular showers of sea spray drenched the deck while thunder rumbled in the distance, vibrating my chest and causing the hair on my arms to stand on end. Rainstorms had never bothered me before, but that had always been when both of my feet had firmly been on the ground. Seeing the awesome power of nature at work reminded me of my own frail mortality. The mighty ship beneath my feet suddenly seemed like a fragile splinter of wood in comparison to the mountainous waves that could flip our vessel as easily as a siren could call us to our deaths. Sirens. The storm had driven them from my mind. Though I hadn't heard of any attacks since Korth's cousin had negotiated the treaty, it didn't make them any less dangerous. Hopefully the storm above the surface gave them sufficient incentive to stay in the depths below. I shuddered. Life was much better on land. It was impossible to determine how long we sailed. I attempted to sleep in the hammock that cradled my body and rocked me back and forth, but slumber evaded me. Seasickness was nothing compared to the guilt that threatened to consume me any time I managed to forget my nausea and dwell instead on how I had betrayed the trust of the man I loved. Once the seas in my stomach finally settled, the sailing became more docile, but my thoughts spun even faster. I was fleeing imprisonment in one kingdom, knowing that the moment Odette saw my face in Ibora, she would have me arrested and executed. I had to beat her back to Ibora so I could warn the rebellion. How fast was this ship compared to a royal vessel from Korth's fleet? Would the storm have delayed their ship's departure? It would take a few days once he was there to recall all the troops he had deployed and smooth out everything with King Raquel and Odette. Tears sprang to my eyes as I imagined Korth sitting in a room with Raquel and Odette as they all berated me for my crimes. And it would all be true. As much as I wished I could cling to the hope that Korth would see through their posturing and recognize the kind of people they were, it was a fool's dream. Even if he had called off his wedding to Odette, Korth had no reason at all to trust the word of the lying traitor who had broken his heart. Just as my desire to see justice served had initially blinded me to the heinousness of my own actions, Korth was unable to see past the wayward actions to the purpose that drove them. A loud clatter came as the ship dropped over a wave, and the hard sea biscuit I'd been trying in vain to eat fell to the deck and rolled into a dark corner, forgotten and overlooked. Was that my future as well? I closed my eyes, hoping that Garrick and I would be able to beat Korth and Odette to Ibora. Chapter 30. Arriving in Ibora was nothing short of chaos. The rebellion had already begun. The lighthouse hadn't been lit, but there was no need for it. The entire place was on fire. Flames licked at the towers and illuminated the columns of smoke billowing up from the turrets. Screams filled our ears, and our nostrils were assaulted by the acrid scent of burning homes. Citizens fled for shelter, clutching their crying children and shouting for loved ones, as Haven Harbor's soldiers clashed sword against sword with King Raquel's guards in the streets between the bay and the palace. When our ship sailed into the harbor, no gatekeeper or harbor master met us to ask our business or inspect the vessel. No one directed us to a specific berth or ordered us to pay port dues. In fact, the harbor seemed completely deserted. Every able-bodied man was farther up in the town, fighting for control of the capital. Captain Renshaw hooted with glee.
"Looks like the time is ripe for looting, gents,"
he shouted, vaulting over the bulwarks to the docks below, where crates and barrels of merchandise must have been forgotten as merchants rushed to avoid the conflict. I shook my head, wondering if he had ever cared about the rebellion's cause, or if he simply wanted anarchy so he could pillage unchecked. Garrick and I scrambled down before the ship had even been properly tied off.
"Dahlia, go hide,"
Garrick barked as we dashed toward the houses. "But my parents!" Garrick drew the cutlass he had claimed from the pirate ship and spun it expertly in his hands, prepared for battle.
"You aren't a fighter, Dahlia. You've done your part. Now it's time to let us do ours."
"But
go,"
he insisted.
"I don't want you to get hurt."
He disappeared into the crowd, headed straight for the burning palace. I stared around frantically, jostled by the refugees seeking safety. Everywhere I looked, terror etched into every citizen's face as they fled or tried to hastily stack furniture to create a makeshift barricade. My own heart raced. The once familiar sight of home now looked unrecognizable. A loud splintering came from behind me, and I whirled around. Captain Renshaw's crew was breaking open crates and pulling out their new treasures, gloating over their finds. I turned away, looking around for any familiar face from the rebellion. There had to be someone I could ask to find out what was going on. The stench of distant smoke mingled with the sea's salty air, and I coughed into my elbow, my senses quickly becoming overwhelmed by the desperate cacophony surrounding me. I just wanted a few moments to think. Where were my parents? Heavy boots thudded against the wooden docks as a small band of Haven Harbor soldiers ran past, pursuing some of King Raquel's guards who had retreated deeper into the city. I faded into the shadow of the tall, ominously dark lighthouse. Would I be recognized by any of them? It didn't seem likely. All the soldiers were too preoccupied with assessing the next threat of attack to bother sparing a second glance for a girl in a servant's dress. Cries from the wounded wailed at the velvety blackness of the sky, and my panic grew. What if one of those voices belonged to my mother or father? A pang of despair throbbed in my heart. I couldn't fade into non-existence, simply waiting to be told what others had done. I hadn't broken out of prison and voyaged across an ocean to hide and wait for news. If I was going to truly be a part of this rebellion, I would make every moment count until my last breath. With renewed conviction, I shuffled around the lighthouse, but the fight had moved closer to the palace. The only movement I saw was Captain Renshaw and his men, still digging through the abandoned wares. Another shadow on the horizon, visible only by the moon's silvery reflection, caught my eye. Another ship was approaching, flying Haven Harbor's colors. Korth and Odette. My sense of urgency grew. If the rebellion was to succeed, it had to be now. We were out of time. Throwing caution to the wind, I sprinted away from the shore, arms pumping hard as I ran toward the danger. I had to know what was happening. I tore through street after street, scanning each face that I saw. Finally, I spotted Garrick once more, engaged in combat with one of Raquel's men-at-arms. With a grunt, Garrick slashed at the man's arm, opening a gash on his bicep. His opponent howled in pain, dropping to a knee to clutch at the wound. "Garrick!" I shouted. Garrick gave the man a kick and looked around.
"I told you to hide!"
"I need to find my parents!"
"I've only been here as long as you have. How should I know where they are?"
He pivoted to face his next attacker. I stumbled back into one of the dark alleys, trying to avoid all the fights. I leaned my head against the back wall, desperate to find any semblance of a rational thought.
"Dahlia, can I talk to you?"
The sound of that particular voice made me whip around and instantly wish I knew how to wield a dagger with lethal force. Kurdy stood in the shadows, head hung low and wringing his hands. No. I jogged away from him. How dare he even think of talking to me after all he had done? I'm sorry. Kurdy hurried after me. I'm sorry for what I did. I shouldn't have turned you in. But it all worked out. You're here now. I knew you'd be let out of prison. No thanks to you, I snapped, increasing my pace. You ruined everything. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Stay away from me. I can make it up to you. You can't. Not even if I tell you where your father is? How could you know? I asked slowly, feet moving at a decreased pace. I don't even know how you got here so quickly. I only just arrived. I left a few days before Odette. Right after we were released, she put me on the ship to Ibora sent to intercept the troops. But they beat us here. My stomach plummeted. So Kurdy had been here for days already? What had he done? Kurdy caught up to me. I know where your father and the king are. Why would you tell me? I tried to tell the others, but no one believed me. I wonder why, I drawled, but was tempted nonetheless. Give me one reason I should trust you. I feel bad about what I did. I want to make it up to you. How do I know you won't betray me again? I said I was sorry. And I claimed I was Princess Odette. Saying something doesn't make it true. Just let me show you. Don't you want to find your parents? I'm sure all of this. He gestured at the night where shouts of pain mingled with the screams of frightened children. Is a little overwhelming to walk into. My teeth ground together as I glared daggers at Kurdy. I would be a fool to trust him, and yet, I didn't have any better option to find my parents. Dahlia, let's go, he urged me, taking a step forward, but I threw a hand up. I'm thinking, okay? You need to come now. His urgency only solidified my suspicions. You could be lying to me. Kurdy swore quietly under his breath. Do you have a better option? I'm not going with you unless you at least hand over your dagger. You won't stab me with it, will you? A ghost of Kurdy's old flirtatious smile flickered across his face as he unbuckled the knife and passed it over. You deserve it, I grumbled. Once his dagger was tightly gripped in my fist, I prodded Kurdy's back. Go on, then. Show me where they are. And stay where I can see you. I threw a glance over my shoulder at where Garrick had been fighting moments before. Did I have time to run and get him? His presence would give me the additional measure of security that I craved. But I couldn't see him. Kurdy twisted through the back roads, his back stiff as he strode down alleyway after alleyway toward the burning palace. Streets soon gave way to shrubs and trees, overshadowed by the glowing ash in the air. Kurdy dodged the foliage, still urging me on. I thought you said it wasn't far, I puffed as I kept up with him. Not far doesn't mean one street over. It had to be secure. That's it over there. He pointed. The safe house didn't look particularly safe. It was located a half-mile outside the palace's estate borders, nestled in the forest like a large woodsman's cottage. Here? I asked him incredulously. I could think of many places that would be much more secure. There weren't even guards stationed around it. Kurdy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, eyes darting from side to side, and my suspicion grew. Yeah. Your father told the king he would take him somewhere safe, then brought him here, away from the other guards, while the rebels took the palace. Look, and you'll see. I hung back, nervously shifting my weight from foot to foot while scanning the surroundings for any sign of accomplices. It felt uncomfortably silent. I'll go in first if you want, Kurdy offered. He knocked softly on the door and breathed, Benedict? Are you in there? A slight scuffling came from inside the ramshackle hut before the door was flung open. Father! I threw myself at him, sobbing in relief. He wrapped his arms around me for a quick hug and kissed my hair, but then with a hurried look around, pulled me inside while Curdy snapped the door closed. The safe house was small and dimly lit, with shadows dancing across the rough stone walls as candles placed on a dusty table flickered and danced. A single dust-covered window allowed a sliver of moonlight to seep through and cast an eerie glow over the scene. As my eyes adjusted to the dim interior, I saw King Raquel, gags stuffed into his mouth and arms bound to a chair, sitting in the center of the empty room. I caught my breath. We'd done it. We had won. With Raquel as a bargaining chip, his followers would crumble. The moment stretched longer, surreal as the taste of victory settled over me. Curdy crossed his arms, a clear "I told you so" expression on his face. A piercing squeal came from outside, which was quickly stifled. Father opened the door, then beamed.
Garrick, I wondered when you'd get here. I saw Dahlia skulking off with that traitor, but it took me time to follow. I just snatched this one.
He shook his load as he ducked under the doorframe.
As she was deboarding. In all the chaos on the docks right now, it was easy.
He held Odette, who was wriggling and squirming, a venomous expression on her face. At the sight of his daughter, Raquel stiffened in his chair, trying to work the gag out of his mouth by thrashing his head from side to side. Garrick tossed Odette to the dusty wooden floor, where she scrambled backward to hide behind Curdy.
Well done,
Father congratulated Garrick.
Both of them at once. This is better than I'd hoped for.
Odette tried to paw her way upright, using Curdy to steady herself, but he shrugged her off and crossed to stand behind Garrick instead. Odette's eyes darted around the room, taking in each of us in turn.
Let me go, and you can have all the money you want.
We don't want your blood money, I spat. We want new leadership.
I can offer you positions of power.
Funny thing,
Garrick growled.
If we dethrone you, we can assign all the positions of power. You can't offer anything we don't already have.
Odette fixed her gaze on Curdy.
I told you I would give you anything you wanted. I still mean it. All you need to do is alert my guard.
Curdy's expression remained impassive, but his fists clenched at his sides. He's not stupid enough to fall for that trick, I snapped. See if she has any weapons. Curdy strode across the room and pulled Odette's dagger from her before retreating behind Garrick again. He then jerked his head at Raquel. Looks like this one is dying to say something. Father pulled the gag down. Raquel spat several times, running his tongue back and forth on his teeth to try and rid it of the gag's taste. After swallowing several times, he looked at his daughter.
Are they coming?
She nodded, and I exchanged looks with Father and Garrick. Were who coming? What are you? I began, but before I could get any further, Curdy struck. Using the dagger he'd taken from Odette, he plunged it into Garrick's back. I screamed as Garrick dropped to his knees and fell face down to the ground. Curdy wrenched the door open and sprinted out into the night, shouting, "Help! Help! The king is under attack!" Chapter 31.
Hold them, Dahlia,
Father cried, leaping after Curdy and drawing his own weapon.
Don't let them get away.
With a terrified look down at Garrick's prone figure, I snatched Odette's wrist, kneed her in the stomach, then slammed her hand repeatedly against the table until she dropped the stone she'd picked up during my momentary distraction. While she was doubled over, gasping for breath, I pulled out the dagger I'd taken from Curdy. Panting, I straightened and pulled Odette's arms behind her back, knife to her throat. She tried to jerk out of my grasp and nearly succeeded. Her time tending the geese had made her stronger, but I had years of servant's work on my side. I held her fast and pressed the blade more firmly against her neck. "Don't move," I snarled, then raised my voice, panic tightening my chest. "Garrick, can you hear me?" A ragged breath sounded. Then Garrick coughed once, lifting his face from the ground to look at me, a dribble of blood running from the side of his mouth.
Dahlia, don't let the rebellion die too,
Garrick whispered, before his eyes closed for the final time as his head fell to the floor. He didn't move again. My entire body trembled as I stared at him, distraught. Odette tried once more to pull away, but I redoubled my grip and pressed the dagger hard enough that she gasped in pain. "I dare you to try me," I whispered menacingly in her ear. "Give me an excuse to kill you, and I swear I will." The rage turning my vision scarlet had a mind of its own, urging my hand to fell the quick blow that would rid me of Odette forever. She deserved it. From all the cruelty and abuse she and her father dealt out, to her complete lack of regret. She deserved to die. The animalistic fury that was consuming me after Garrick's death applauded the thought. I could end this, right here and now. I hoped my father would find and kill Kurdy. He deserved it too. His betrayal in Haven Harbor had been a blow, and this second betrayal turned my stomach. Such is the danger of dealing with one whose allegiance can be bought.
"There's no chance of you winning,"
Raquel sneered at me.
"The guards will be on their way."
Big words from a man who's tied up. How fitting that this is your final throne. I nodded at the dilapidated wooden chair. You have nothing. My hand itched to silence him and his daughter both. He sneered.
"You're wrong. I'm a king. It doesn't matter if you take my throne and my crown. I'll always be worth more than you. You're simply an imposter with a blade. I was born to lead. You were and always will be a nobody."
I let out a harsh bark of laughter. So much bluster for someone whose daughter is at my mercy. Here's my offer. Publicly revoke your claim to the throne when the guards come, and I'll let your daughter live. You can choose to cling to your crown or protect her. Odette whimpered.
"You must be mad,"
Raquel sniffed.
"You think threats will change anything?"
I glared at him. It's no threat. It's a promise. The people are suffering under your rule. They deserve a leader who cares for them, not one who bleeds them dry for his own gain. Raquel laughed openly.
"You think you and your little band of rebels can do any better? You have no idea what it takes to lead."
We certainly couldn't do worse than you have. Answer me, or I'll kill her.
"Kill her, then."
Odette let out a gasp of horror, and I froze. What? Raquel's smile broadened.
"Kill her. You think I care for one girl's life more than the fate of the entire kingdom? I don't negotiate with traitors and terrorists, and my guards will be here any moment. I knew Kurdy's plan would work. Once they see the dead bodies and me tied up, you'll have no chance of escape."
Once I kill her, I would kill you next.
"Prove it, then. Show me your commitment."
"I'm your daughter!"
Odette cried. For the first time, I heard genuine pain in her voice.
"She won't do it,"
Raquel told her with a yawn.
"You aren't at risk. Real power is never given. It's taken, and your handmaiden there lacks the proper will. I see it in her eyes."
I tightened my grip on Odette, but my knife hand shook. The world would be a better place without her or her horrible father. I could strike a fatal blow against them. The rebellion would succeed. Our coup would be victorious. It was all within reach.
"Dahlia,"
Odette whispered.
"Please don't."
"I have demands," I shouted, my trembling growing worse than ever. "You will reunite the families you've torn apart. Slavery will end, and we will restructure the government to give people a stronger voice." When would father get back here? Or would Kurdy kill him too? Raquel laughed openly.
"You think I would ever listen to your pathetic pleas? You know nothing."
An icy, invisible hand had a death grip on my heart, twisting and wrenching it as I grappled with my own morality. How far was I willing to go to achieve what I wanted? If I didn't stay my hand, how was I any different from Raquel and Odette? I had told Korth that I didn't regret my actions from before, and that was true. My gaze settled on Garrick. Did I want to avenge him enough to act on the temptation tugging at me? I screwed up my face. It was wrong to take a life. Even if they deserved to die, I didn't want to be the one to strike that final blow. No matter how long a list of crimes I had to be an end. Raquel was sneering at me.
I told you she wouldn't. These commoners are all talk. They claim they want control, but are too weak to seek it.
Valuing life was not weakness. Listening to my moral compass and wanting to do the right thing, even if others refused to, was not weakness. Could I commit the ultimate sin on the quest for righteousness? I had come so far. Victory was within reach. But now that the time for action had come, I felt paralyzed by indecision.
Dahlia,
Odette whispered once more.
Please.
The icy hand around my heart dug its nails in, shredding the very fibers of my being. Everything I'd ever wanted was within reach. One quick cut was all that was required, and Odette would be silenced forever. I could do it. For once, everything was on my side. We were alone. They were guilty, and I had the upper hand. And yet, if I killed Odette and the king, what would that prove? That we were the exact type of bloodthirsty rebels we were painted to be? I disgusted myself. What had I become? I could kill her. I could. But I chose not to. I'm not a murderer. With a grunt, I flung my dagger to the ground. It skittered away, spinning in circles before it came to rest halfway between Raquel and Odette. You will both stand trial, so everyone can see you answer for your crimes. I gave Odette a shove, and she fell to her hands and knees, then flipped over and clawed her way backward away from me.
See?
Raquel said silkily.
I told you she wouldn't. Bring that dagger here before your treasonous handmaiden gets any other bright ideas.
Odette scrambled upward and scooped up the knife, staring back and forth between her father and me. I backed away to the door. I would lock them in and wait for my father. Surely he would be here soon. Slowly, Odette stepped toward her father, never taking her eyes off me.
You told her to kill me,
she told Raquel in utter shock. Raquel laughed out loud.
I knew she wouldn't. She's already proven.
His words were cut off as Odette whirled about and plunged the dagger into his chest. He spluttered and choked, fingers scrabbling helplessly on the arms of his chair as the blade was buried up to the hilt over his heart.
Like you said,
Odette hissed in his ear.
Real power isn't given. It's taken. And even if others lack it, I do have the proper will.
The glimmer of a laugh flickered in Raquel's eyes before they dimmed as he gurgled,
Well done, daughter. You finally proved yourself worthy of the throne.
Odette withdrew the knife and shoved her father, whose chair toppled to the ground. A small cloud of dust puffed up as a final tribute to the fallen king. I stared back and forth between Raquel and Odette, then down at Garrick, unable to breathe. For all of my plotting and planning and scheming, I had never imagined this. Blood still dripped from the dagger Odette held. Without breaking eye contact with me, Odette withdrew the scrap of fabric she always carried in her bodice and delicately dabbed it to the tip of the dagger to add another stain.
Have you ever wondered why I've carried this my entire life?
Odette said, waving the fabric dry before carefully folding it and replacing the scrap into her bodice again. I didn't answer. Each second ticking by lasted an eternity, and my entire body tingled from the desire to run. Where was father? How close were the guards Korth had gone to get? Undeterred by my silence, Odette went on.
It serves as a constant reminder of the threats that surround being in a position of power, and a reminder that I have the strength to eliminate those threats. After your little coup, I had intended for you to be the fourth placed here. But now I can see you're no threat to me at all.
My mouth felt as dry as a scorched desert. Words failed me.
The first drop was my uncle's. Father killed him so that he had no sibling to challenge his claim to the throne. Framing others when you are in a position of power really is child's play. The second drop was the previous captain of the guard who suspected my father. I took care of him. It's so easy to poison an untended cup. The third was my nursemaid. She tried to take me away from my father several years back, telling me it would be better to be raised as a commoner. Can you believe it? I couldn't have that.
Every muscle in my body was tensed, but I couldn't move at all. I remembered when Odette's old nursemaid took her on a brief vacation some years back. I had been told that they went to the seaside, but Odette had returned alone, sobbing and claiming that the nursemaid had been taken by sirens. I couldn't believe that I had ever trusted her story. Odette exhaled through her nose, nostrils flaring.
She didn't understand true power. This drop signifies that I was ready to do what was necessary to claim the throne. I always knew if I ever wanted to rule, I'd need to kill my father. He'd never relinquish the throne otherwise, and I don't want to wait until I'm old to become queen. Why do you think he wanted to send me to a foreign land? All I had to do was play the part of a superficial princess all this time to mask any crimes. No one ever suspects a vain, spoiled princess of duplicity. You understand the need to act, don't you?
My mouth hung agape.
I'll admit, I was angry at first, Odette went on. Not really at you, but at myself for not seeing through your façade. But the more time I spent watching you, even from afar, it became painfully obvious that you weren't worthy of any kind of throne.
I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting over to the king's dead body. His death felt surreal. The rebellion had been plotting it for so long that I couldn't believe it had finally happened. Then Garrick. He had been a good man who simply wanted to build a better future. My feet felt rooted to the ground, incapable of fleeing.
You actually fell for Korth, didn't you?
Odette shook her head.
That is the first rule of leadership. Look out for yourself and only for yourself. She gestured at her father. No one will ever care, not even your family. So the only person you can count on is yourself.
You're wrong, I choked out. Korth cared.
Oh, is that why he had you thrown in prison and planned to marry me?
Odette let out a guffaw.
Because he cared for you so much? Korth thought he cared about you too. If both of you hadn't let emotions get in the way, your little plot might have succeeded. But no. Korth's jealousy was eating him alive.
Odette snickered.
It only took a few hints from me about how you used to talk about having feelings for him all the time, and how it was such a shame that a prince was stealing away your heart when it could have been him instead. The poor, besotted boy started running off to spy on you every other night, and it was simple to bend him to my will after that.
I could just imagine how easy it would have been for Odette to play off Korth's insecurities and fears and tell him lies that fed his absurd crush on me. No wonder he started leaving his post so frequently.
I wish you could have heard our conversations after he saw you falling for your oh-so-noble prince. People are so easy to manipulate when they feel vulnerable.
She laughed.
It's ironic, really. I had planned to use Korth in the same way you did. With Haven Harbor's navy at my back, My father would have been forced to step down and let me rule in his stead. We're not so different, you and I.
My breath came in short bursts. In that moment, all I wanted was to be near Korth. I wanted to feel safe, even if I had to pay for my crimes. Men's shouts grew louder and louder, as did the sound of clanking weapons.
Go on,
Odette told me, flicking her dagger once toward the door.
You spared my life, and now I'm sparing yours. I suggest you run before they find you next to these dead bodies.
I took a step backward in surprise. Was this kindness from Odette? She tilted her head severely.
I won't tell you again. Get running before I change my mind.
I didn't need to be told twice. As I pelted out the door, I heard Odette screech from behind me,
Guards! Guards, help! She murdered the king! Catch her!
My senses sharpened and my pace quickened. Odette had showed no kindness. She had simply needed a scapegoat for her father's murder, and here I was, running away from the scene of the crime. And I couldn't stop.